Cool. Okay. So my name is Matt Green. I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins. I worked in the privacy space, the cryptocurrency space, for many, many years. I worked on a lot of different areas. This talk, which hopefully I'll be able to give in a sec, is not. I'm sorry. Did I screw up my screen share? Here. Yeah. Sorry. I was walking around. There we go. Oh, thank you. I so appreciate it.
That's all right.
9991 or is it different?
No, it's changes. Yeah, all right, now we go.
Okay, cool. All right, even better. Yeah, this is my fault. So I was asked 2 days ago to turn in my slides, and then I was asked yesterday to turn in my slides, and then I said I need to be working on my slides until about 5 minutes before the talk, so that's kind of how I roll. So we'll see. So this talk, so I was asked by Mike to talk a little bit about privacy in general. I've worked on cryptocurrency for many, many years, but I've also worked in the sort of non-cryptocurrency world. And I think finally we're weirdly making great progress on adding privacy to cryptocurrency. So I no longer feel terrified about that. In some ways, I'm a little terrified of like what's going to happen on the other side of that, but it's no longer a big priority or problem, although I am working on that. What I am really worried about is everything else that's happening. Before I get there, let me talk a little bit about some stuff that I've done in the past. I see this timer up there that says 37 minutes. I'm not talking for 37 minutes. You're going to be very bored if I am. Okay, good. I, several years ago, got very interested in the problem of can we build Bitcoin but private? The result of that research with my students was that we actually launched 2 cryptocurrencies. One's called Zcash, which is weirdly blown up like in the last 2 weeks, and we'll probably go back to being very quiet. The other is this new currency called Alio, or this new system where Alio is basically like Ethereum but private. And I love doing this kind of research that becomes real things. That's one of the reasons I love cryptocurrency. But a lot of the work that I do is actually on the problem of like how do we have privacy in the real world, specifically end-to-end encryption, which is, I think, very important. Backdoors, how do we like deal with the fact that, not so relevant to us anymore, but back in 2013, there was a lot of news coming out about the NSA doing some pretty bad things to encryption. We no longer have that news now, which I guess is good for the NSA, but it doesn't mean whatever, has stopped happening. And obviously I'm working a lot on adding compliance to privacy, and that's kind of an area that I'm still working on. One of the things that, one of the sort of examples of like why this is my non-technical work is spending a lot of time arguing with policymakers about this idea that like encryption is good, privacy is good. We should not be finding ways to weaken encryption. And so this is just like one example of many of these kind of DC style debates where on the one hand you have a bunch of technical people saying privacy, we need to build this technology, not just privacy, but like national security. And on the other side you have people saying, but we can't access this data, we need to access this data. And this is a National Sciences Foundation report that we worked on many years ago. Unfortunately, this was the easy days. It's gotten a little bit worse since then. And as an example of it getting worse, right now on the table in Europe, in the European Union, there is a proposal. So the previous proposal was, hey, occasionally we will show up with a warrant and access the data on your phone. The new proposal that's now being debated in the UK and the EU is we're going to use AI to scan every single text that you send through an encrypted messenger app, only to find out if you're doing really criminally bad things, of course. So you won't be reported on if you don't do those bad things. But you can kind of see the direction that as a society we're going down, where like, the police can see everything you do, but only the good police, only the good automated police, no human being will ever see that. Okay, and we're also just very recently seeing examples of the UK and the EU doing even more aggressive things. There was this big thing, which you may or may not have seen about 6 months ago, where the UK government secretly created a, what's it called, technical capability notice, where they went to Apple and they said, you have end-to-end encrypted backup and we don't want it to be encrypted anymore, but you can't tell anybody about it. It turns out that leaked, and so that became a big story. It was in the Washington Post, and the UK kind of, relaxed their stance a little bit. They were originally planning to read all of the messages in the world. Now they're saying, well, just UK users, but this fight is still going. They didn't drop their proposals. It's just kind of shifted a little bit. So this is all happening. All right, so what I want to convince you of in this talk, and maybe I don't have to convince you, maybe I'm just telling you things you already know, I want to convince you that things are going to get really, really bad, and they're going to do this in a hurry. And so the talk title was The Coming Forest Fire, the coming privacy forest fire. To have a forest fire, you need ingredients, right? So the first ingredient you need is you need some kind of fuel that's ready to burn. And if the fuel is already dry and just sitting there, that's fantastic, right? So we've spent the last 15 to 20 to 30 years building all of that timber and the infrastructure to collect data at a massive scale. That's our dry timber. Our second part is we need something, like that will take whatever fire we start, if there's an ember, we need to accelerate that. And what's accelerating this is new types of data collection that we never even envisioned would be reasonable. I had a conversation with someone yesterday. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you believe when you use Google, not logged in, that later down the line, someone, whether it's police or a lawsuit or maybe just Google itself, forget Google itself, somebody outside of Google can recover your entire search history? How many of you believe that? Okay, how many of you believe that there is a case on file, a legal case in public court filings, where the police recovered someone's entire search history based even when they were logged out? I cannot find one. So the reason that I'm saying this, there are examples of what are called keyword warrants, where the police look for, the fire at this address, and they find people who searched for that specific term. But there are not examples that I could find where this intuition we have where all of our data is just available even when we're logged out. I don't think that's actually so easy. Of course, we know, maybe as technical people, that probably Google could do this, but they don't. And I'm trying to explain to people that our paranoid intuition versus our actual expectation. If you really believed that it was that easy to get your entire search history for every single embarrassing thing you searched on, would you have searched those embarrassing things? So I believe we've all searched things. I searched for rice and poison after watching Breaking Bad, and then I was like, what did I just do? Oh no. But I think that there's a part of our brain that intellectually believes that everything is being logged, but there's a much bigger part of our brain that actually says, look, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's not going to come back and bite me. Because it's too hard to put together all those things. That is not going to happen anymore, because in the future, everything we do online is going to be tightly bound to our identity. Incognito mode is not going to be a thing, right? Maybe it'll be sort of a thing, but it won't be real. And it's not even a thing now, but it will be much less of a thing. It will be much more legible to governments. The thing that I don't think should be controversial, but I don't think anyone really understands at an intuitive level, is that if you take these previous two things and you combine them with what's about to happen to us, that's when everything gets terrible. So in the past, we've survived all of this data collection because we have limited human capacity to process data. But that's not a problem anymore. Maybe it's only a problem due to economics at this point, and the economics are going down at a huge rate. All those data centers that are propping up our economy right now some fraction of them are going to be processing that data in new ways, and some fraction of that is going to be available to anyone else. And the last thing, so this is kind of the thing, so that's over, and we have this kind of combination where the combination is machine learning inference at very large scale, plus identity binding tied to everything you do in the world, plus this fact, which I'll talk about in a little bit, where privacy norms, governments are really going after encryption and privacy norms. And this is going to create a combined privacy risk that doesn't grow in this sum of its parts kind of way, that grows super linearly, and the actual risk to human beings is going to be much higher than we think it is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the dry timber. I don't think I'm going to say anything in this part that's super surprising. By the way, how much time do I actually have? Because I'm just talking a lot. So. Okay, that's great. All right. So if we go back in time, I have a picture of Justin Bieber here just to show you what back in time looks like. So this is back to 2010. I had somewhere, I think I deleted the slide that shows him today, so it's shocking. But if we go back to 2010, 2010 for me is not very long ago. For my kids, it's a long time ago, but for me, this is just around yesterday. But look at the things we were using. Our whole electronic life was wildly different back in 2010. Here's another illustration of how things have changed. This shows the amount of text messaging we did up until 2010 and how we did it. The dark bars, I think, are SMS, and you can see when online platforms take over, and the knee is about 2011, actually, and everything kind of changes there. Advertising revenue, the knee is about 2010, 2011, and then everything bends upward. And this is kind of an interesting period because it was also the first period where we realized that, or at least nation states realized that this data was going to be very, very, very important. So this is an event. Does anyone actually remember Operation Aurora, if you hadn't seen this slide? I think it's fallen out of the public consciousness. Back in 2009, 2010, Google was hacked, allegedly by a Chinese advanced persistent threat group, state-sponsored hackers. They got into the wiretapping system, the system that federal agents use to do investigations on people. They weren't necessarily interested in starting new investigations. They wanted to know who was being investigated, but it had a huge amount of impact on the security of Google. It also caused Google to leave China, which is probably one of the biggest business impacts of this. It was a big deal. Google moved their security department, their headquarters, to a building far away from the rest of campus with threat models like people are shining lasers at our windows. They were very, very worried about this. It completely changed the way Google processed data. You might or might not remember this. This is from 2013, I think. This is a slide out of the Snowden leaks. It shows how the NSA viewed Google at the time. And what it really shows is the encryption you were using to add Google ended at that box, which is called Google Front End, GFE. And everything inside of those clouds was actually a bunch of different data centers, fiber optics going all over the world. None of it was encrypted. And of course, for the NSA, you can see the smiley face. That was amazing, right? They were getting total access to your email, to all of your private data with no protections whatsoever by tapping those fiber links. That's been changed since then, but it shows that they recognize this. Google, the NSA, that's not Google, the NSA at the time, or a few years before that, even started building a vast data center. And the data center wasn't for computation. It was just full of hard drives. So they knew that this data, even if they couldn't access it, they were going to record it, and I assume it's even bigger now. Okay, so we need those things. That's the dry timber, but we need to talk about the accelerant. There are a bunch of laws. None of this should be shocking to you. I think a bunch of sites are now banned in several states, if you've seen this. There are a bunch of laws now asking for age verification. Age verification, how do you verify your age? Well, you can show some emails, you can say, I'm 18, you can do whatever you want. The way we're gonna show our age, has anyone installed their driver's license on their phone yet? One person and a person who's not sure. You should be sure because one way or another, it's gonna matter. You can install your driver's license on your phone and you get this silly looking thing. I have a little crab because I'm from Maryland. And it's useless. You can go through TSA with it. If you get a speeding ticket, you can't show it. It's ridiculous. Why is Apple spending millions and millions of dollars allowing you to do that? And Google is doing the same. And the reason is, at some point in the near future, that tightly bound human identity on your phone is going to be used for stuff you do online. We don't know how that's going to happen and when, but within the next 5 to 10 years. So this is a thing that's already happening, and the technology is being built to do it, and the laws are being put in place to require it. So you can see all of these things coming in together. But I don't think people are really thinking about the effect of these laws if they're not done well. So we're binding a human ID to things that previously never had them, and that human ID is a legible government ID. I could, as a government agent with a warrant, say, give me every piece of online activity that this person with driver's license X did. And that's not something you can do today or you could do in 2010, but you're gonna be able to do that in the future. And that's gonna be interesting. You're gonna be able to consume that information and analyze. There are some people who are trying to make that problem less of a problem. Google is building a toolkit to do zero-knowledge anonymous authentication for age verification. So when you do browse the web, it won't be your name, it will be a proof that says, I'm a person who has a driver's license and I'm not, under 18. So maybe that will be the solution, but it's not clear. And even if that is the solution, I could see that being potentially kind of scary to people, particularly policymakers. So the last thing is, build a forest fire. It really helps if there's kind of some wind and something kind of pushing the fire onward. So the good news is for all of these things, cryptography, encryption, these are all solutions I can advocate for, and they're good solutions. They do work. End-to-end encryption, left to itself, works. Zero-knowledge proofs, if we build them, do work. the policy around them, the environment is kind of degrading. And so there are a whole bunch of new laws I mentioned that are being proposed to insert AI scanning into encrypted messaging. There are active bans on end-to-end encryption for backup. And of course, since this is, some people here are cryptocurrency people, there are also bans on privacy tech as well for cryptocurrency. I still feel better about the cryptocurrency world than everything else. This all started back in 2013. The FBI created a website called Going Dark, which kind of gives you a feeling of how policymakers and law enforcement felt about encryption. And maybe you remember Apple had a big legal case back in 2016. Like I said, it's kind of metastasized into a different thing, which is this online scanning proposal. I had another great link about this, but real-time scanning, which is a much bigger ask than what was being asked for before. So this is kind of changing in a frightening way. Okay, so I'm sort of running out of time. I hope I've at least convinced you that there's some bad stuff going on in these things combined. So with my very, very limited time remaining, the question that we should be asking is, what can we do? So there's a policy question and there is a tech question, but I wish I could tell you that these were like, in the old cypherpunk days, we tech people would just go out and try to build stuff and it would fix everything, but that's not realistic and it never has been. So the first thing we need to do from a policy perspective is we need to actually resist these identity binding mandates. At very least, we have to make sure that any identity binding mandate that we add to everything is done in a privacy preserving way. And that's going to create the second fight that we have to have, which is it fully privacy preserving or is it privacy preserving with a warrant exception? And we haven't even begun that discussion, which is terrifying because these laws are being passed right now, and that's going to be a big fight. Second is we have to make sure that if there are verification artifacts, we ban their retention. Firms, websites are no good at keeping this stuff. If it's not privacy preserving, they will log it, and they will log your identity with every single thing you do, and that data is going to be incredibly valuable. So we have to limit the resale of that information. From the tech side, I know a lot of things we can do, but this would be too long of a list to put here. Anonymous authentication does not work. I would love to tell you that all we have to do is replace cookies with zero-knowledge proofs and we're done. But what happens when somebody takes my key or my driver's license credentials off my phone and copies them onto 10,000 different phones that are all bots, which is what they're going to do? Right? Today, what happens is Google sees a cookie coming in from 10,000 different IP addresses and says, your account's been hacked, we're going to block you. If I'm anonymous, if I'm a zero-knowledge proof, they can't do that. So that's a huge technical barrier to just the existence of these kinds of credentials. We don't have a solution. I'd love to tell you that the academic world has fixed this. Nobody's fixed this. So there's a vast amount of rapid research that needs to happen soon to make anonymous alternatives possible. And I think that if you're a security team, which you're not, but probably you're not, but we need to actually start thinking about what happens, what is this data valuable for? Let's try to actually use it for inference and see what we can learn. Anyway, so if we do all of those things, maybe the result is that the damage will be mitigated. Maybe the damage is just this instead of a total disaster. But there's another world where we do none of these things, and I don't know what that world looks like. But it's not going to be a good world, and I want to leave a better world for my kids, and the world where we just let all of this happen is not a great one. So thank you. I appreciate it.